The goal in chess is to checkmate your opponent's king, leaving it trapped with no safe moves. The king can only move one square at a time in any direction, forward, backward, sideways, or diagonally. Can you move the king straight up one square to get closer to the corner? Excellent. The king climbs up the board and is now touching the top left corner square. The king is ready to move to the top left corner square. Can you move the king straight up to reach this square? Excellent. The king climbs to the top of the board. The king wants to move into the center of the board. Can you move the king up one square diagonally to the right? Great job. You move the king into the center of the board. The king wants to move to another center square. This time, can you move the king to the side, one square to the right? Great job. The king visits another center square. Can you move the king straight down into the corner? Fantastic. The king reaches the corner. The queen can move forwards, backwards, sideways, and diagonally like a king. However, unlike the king, the queen can move as far as it wants to in each of these directions. The queen wants to travel all the way to the top of the board in a single move. Can you find the move? Excellent job! The queen reaches the top of the board in a single move. Now the queen wants to move sideways to the right, visiting the corner of the board in a single move. Can you move the queen to that square? Great job! The queen slides to the corner of the board. The queen wants to slide down the diagonal and reach the lower left-hand corner of the board in a single move. Can you find the move? Excellent. The queen wants to move straight up the board and reach the top left-hand corner square, but white's king is in the way. Can you find a queen move where it can reach its goal on the following turn? Excellent job. The queen can now move to the left-hand corner square on the next turn. Can you find another square for the queen that does the same thing? The queen wants to move straight up the board and reach the top left-hand corner square, but white's king is in the way. Can you find a queen move where it can reach its goal on the following turn? Fantastic. The queen is now ready to move up the diagonal to reach its desired square on the next turn. You can do that in the next challenge. The queen is ready to climb the diagonal to reach the top left-hand corner of the board. Can you find the move? Great job! The rook can move forwards, backward, and sideways. The rook wants to travel up and reach the other side of the board in just one move. Can you find that move? Great, you did it! The rook would like to visit one of the four corner squares on the chessboard. Can you find the corner square it can move to now? Excellent! The rook reaches one of the four corner squares. Both rooks want to move sideways to the right all the way to the other side of the board. Which rook can reach the other side in a single move? Fantastic! Both rooks want to reach the top of the board, but only one can do it right away. How can you do it? Good effort, but this move does not allow a rook to move to the top of the board. Try again. Both rooks want to reach the top of the board, but only one can do it right away. How can you do it? You got it! The rook in the lower right-hand corner is blocked by its own pieces. The rook wants to move along the first rank. Can you move another piece to open up the rook's path? Great job. The king moves out of the rook's way so it can move along the first rank on the next turn. The bishop can move diagonally like a queen, but not forward, backward, or sideways. Each side starts with two bishops, one on a light square and one on a dark square. The bishop wants to move to the other side of the board in a single move. Can you find the move? Great job. The bishop travels across the entire board in a single move. The bishop wants to be on the longest light diagonal on the whole board, the one that goes from the top left to the bottom right. How can it get there? Nice try, but this move does not move the bishop to the diagonal between the top left and bottom right corners. Try again. The bishop wants to be on the longest light diagonal on the whole board, the one that goes from the top left to the bottom right. How can it get there? Fantastic. The bishop could move to any square on the long diagonal on its next move. The dark squared bishop is in the center of the board. Can you move the light squared bishop to the square directly to the right of it and have both bishops in the center? This move does not bring the light squared bishop into the center. Try again. The dark squared bishop is in the center of the board. Can you move the light squared bishop to the square directly to the right of it and have both bishops in the center? Fantastic. Both bishops enjoy great squares in the center. The bishop wants to travel to the other side and reach the top of the board in just 2 moves. Can you find the way? Great job. The bishop can reach the other side of the board on the next turn. White's bishop is ready to climb to the top of the chessboard. Move the bishop to the top of the diagonal. Great job. The bishop reaches the top of the chessboard. The knight is the only chess piece that doesn't go in a straight line. The knight moves 2 squares in one direction and then turns and goes 1 square to the side. The knight wants to reach the top of the chessboard in a single move. Can you find the move? Great job! The knight jumps to the top of the chessboard. Knights love to be in the center of the action. Move the knight into the center of the board. Great job! The knight lands directly in the center. White has 1 knight in the center of the board. Move the other knight into the center. Great job! Both knights are now in the center of the board. Most of the knight's squares are blocked by pieces. Can you find a forward move to bring the knight into the center of the action? Excellent. The knight jumps over its own pieces to enter the center of the board. Find the square for the knight that would be able to reach all 4 of black's pieces at once. Great job. All 4 of black's pieces are on squares that the knight controls. Pawns move 1 square forward and cannot move back. A pawn may advance 2 squares on its first move. Pawns can only capture 1 square diagonally ahead. White's pawn can move 1 or 2 squares on its first turn. Play the move that puts the pawn into the center of the board. Great job! The pawn jumps into the center of the board. White has 2 pawns, but only one of the pawns can move 2 squares on the next turn. Which one? Excellent. This was the first time the pawn moved in the game, so it can move 1 or 2 squares. White has 3 pawns, but 2 of them are blocked by black pawns. Play the only move available for white. Great job. The pawn has a free path to advance up the board. White's pawn may seem small compared to black's 2 rooks, but can you find a way to attack both in just 1 move? Great job. The pawn moves up 1 square and now threatens to capture the rook's 1 square diagonally away from the pawn. White's bishop is blocked from all directions. Move a pawn that opens up a diagonal for the bishop. Fantastic. The pawn opens up a diagonal for the bishop, which is now attacking black's king. When a pawn reaches the end of the board, it promotes. It turns into another piece. Most of the time, players promote to a queen, but a rook, knight, or bishop is also possible. White has two pawns. Can you promote one of them to the strongest possible piece on the next turn? You promoted the pawn into a rook. It's a good move, but you can promote the pawn into a stronger piece. Try again. White has two pawns. Can you promote one of them to the strongest possible piece on the next turn? Great job! You promoted the pawn into a queen, the most powerful piece on the board. Notice the newly promoted queen is now attacking the black king. White has a pawn 3 squares away from promoting and a pawn that is still on its starting square. What is White's best pawn move to play to promote quickly? Great job! White's pawn begins its journey up the board. It will take 4 more moves to promote, but Black's king cannot prevent it from advancing. We have a pawn race. Both sides are trying to promote a pawn as fast as they can. Which pawn should White move to win the promotion race? Great job! White will promote first. Now let's promote White's pawn into a queen. White's pawn is now a queen. Notice the queen controls the promotion square of the black pawn. Black's pawn is 1 move away from promoting. Find White's move that protects the promotion square and saves the game. Great job! Black promotes the pawn, but the new queen is short-lived. Let's capture it and save the game. Nice defensive technique. You saved the game. White has 2 pawns. Which one can you promote quickly so that Black's king won't capture it? Good start. Black's king is approaching your pawn. Can you promote to the strongest possible piece before Black catches the pawn? Well done. There is one weird pawn move where a pawn makes its first move up 2 squares and can be captured. Watch the video to learn more. In this position, Black just advanced the pawn to e6. Capture this pawn. Great job! White captures the e6 pawn. Capture Black's queen. Great job! Black just moved the e-pawn 2 squares on its first turn to the e5 square. Can you use en passant to capture the pawn by moving your pawn to e6? Excellent! White uses the en passant rule to capture Black's pawn. White has 2 pawns that can advance 2 squares. Play the move that safely avoids en passant. Excellent! The pawn marches forward and will promote into a queen. En passant while also revealing an attack on the queen. This move wins a pawn, but it turns out there is a much stronger en passant option. En passant while also revealing an attack on the queen. Fantastic! White plays en passant with the g-pawn, which checks Black's king and opens up an attack on Black's queen. White will win a queen on the next turn. Do not en passant this time. Black just played f7, f5. What's White's best capture? Good choice. White wins a piece. A great strategy to help win chess games is to capture opposing pieces. Most captures are made the same way that pieces normally move, but pawns capture diagonally. Can you find a capture for white? Fantastic. White captures the rook, which was threatening to capture the queen. What can white capture? Excellent. The knight captures the powerful queen. White has turned the game around and is now ahead. Can you find the one pawn that can capture a piece? Remember, pawns move forward, but capture diagonally. You got it. White captures the knight with a pawn. Black's bishop is attacking the rook on a1. How can you capture that bishop? Excellent. White's other rook saves the rook by capturing the bishop. In this position, white has several captures, but only one of them is good. Can you find white's best capture? The white queen captures a pawn, but that pawn wasn't unprotected. Black's rook will now capture the queen. Not a good trade for white. Try again. In this position, white has several captures, but only one of them is good. Can you find white's best capture? Excellent. White's king jumps into the action and captures the rook.